email abstracts by category every night, East Coast time, which is a major work ritual for a large fraction of our scientific community. We cover specific subject areas. Growth in ArXiv has mostly been organic. We are open to expansion, but adding subject areas takes resources. And we can only expand both if the demand is there and if we get the resources to actually accommodate the expansion and manage it, which is an increasingly non-trivial task. What a lot of you may not know is ArXiv has moved. It is now there on a small island just by Manhattan. We moved to the Cornell Tech campus this spring. So far, precisely one staff member of ArXiv has been to our new offices for approximately half an hour. Our executive director picked up her laptop in Key and was then told to stay off campus, and that was 7 months ago. The rest of us have not yet been to our offices. It's been an interesting year. It's a very nice office, I'm told. Good coffee shop, too. We moved there from Ithaca, where we had been at the Cornell University Libraries, and then we were temporarily resident at the Cornell Computer and Information Science Department, and then we moved to Cornell Tech by mutual agreement. All right. Greg Morrissette is the vice provost for Cornell Tech and is the person ultimately in charge of ArXiv. And this year we hired a new executive director, which is a full-time position, which is new for us, Dr. Eleanor Prasani, who is in overall charge. Just to give you a sense of the scope of ArXiv, we have a total of 12 staff, 4 of whom are part-time. That is the entire capacity we have currently. We have lost some staff in the last 18 months, and we are in a hiring freeze. So a lot of what I say is contingent on the fact that ArXiv is under a hiring freeze, and that we have limited capabilities to react to events. The core of ArXiv, the actual work, is done by approximately 200 volunteer moderators, covering about 150 categories. And the moderators are typically senior PhDs in tenured or tenure equivalent positions who volunteer their time to ideally scan the category they're in charge of every day and just try to do a sanity check on everything that comes through. This is a fairly hard task, and we are very grateful to our many volunteer moderators. The additional structure we have within ArXiv is we have subject advisory committees, which are sort of committees of senior scientists, one for each major subject area. And then we have overall advisory boards. We have a science advisory board. We have a member advisory board, which is basically from consists of our funders. And we have additionally a newly instituted technology advisory board. That's getting to be a lot of boards, but we're thinking about that. Funding is in several parts. We have a network of members, which are mostly university libraries or university library consortia, or research institute libraries or equivalent thereof. We have a couple of hundred of those spread around the world, and they donate a small amount of money per member, adding up to a significant fraction of our total operational budget. This is matched by the Simons Foundation on a rolling grant, providing a large chunk of our additional operational funding. Cornell provides in-kind and service costs to ArXiv. And then we have an assortment of temporary or one-off donations, both from individuals. We do a little Wikipedia-style fundraising on the web once or twice a year, and from various foundations or corporations that provide one-off donations or in-kind contributions. And this adds up to roughly $1 million a year, just to give you like an order of magnitude estimate of our total operating costs. Okay, this is the ArXiv. This is probably the best summary of ArXiv ever. You should all go and click on it and check the rollover text. I have this pinned on my door. we still don't actually quite understand how it happened, but it does. One of our keys is that ArXiv does not hold copyright. We do not ask for copyright. We do not want copyright to any of our content. We just pass out stuff that people who hold the copyright, the authors, wish to provide for other people to read. Once you send it to us, there are terms of agreement. We have a right to retain it in perpetuity, and we have a right to categorize it or reject it. ArXiv is a curated collection. It is not the internet. We strive for having a very slim operation. We like to have minimal features on our web pages, in part because of decade-long considerations for bandwidth, and the fact that a large fraction of our users can be bandwidth limited. So we try to keep everything as simple as possible. We do need to do some tidying up our web pages. In case you haven't noticed, they kind of grew organically over the decades, and we're going to try to do a push to rationalize those. We are primarily LaTeX based. That is by choice. We want to have source for the materials, the actual text source, so we can recreate them. We have not found a viewable output of the source that we are entirely happy with. We originally provided PostScript and still do, and currently provide PDF as our main delivery, but that is not a totally satisfactory way of producing stuff. As I'll note later, we are hoping to provide HTML5 content as well, if we can get the resources to do so. That is a project that has been suspended. All things being equal, if you want to send a paper to ArXiv, we require your LaTeX source. If you can't do LaTeX, we will try to work with you, and if necessary, accept a PDF. A big factor in our consideration is not only that we be able to recreate the paper at an arbitrarily later time, and we do that in fact by keeping a auto-tech tree of all tech releases for the last 30 years, except we missed 2017 because of reasons. It's also so we can do text searches. In particular, we desire to have natural language processing abilities for our entire corpus, and that has been a goal of ArXiv for a long time. So we will not accept any bitmap or encrypted files, just so people know that. The ArXiv identifier is stable. If you type that string in, it'll take you straight to the ArXiv abstract anywhere on the web. And it predates DOIs. It is, in fact, a DOI, although it is not in a strict DOI format. And we have an annual debate about whether to make the effort to go to a full DOI. In case you care about such things, the answer is yes. I think we are going to do a DOI for everything. We're going to mint DOIs for the whole corpus of ArXiv and have a DOI that parallels the ArXiv ID. That may make some of your lives easier. An interesting feature noticed a number of years ago, and I think I cite the original paper in the little short paper that accompanies this talk, is that it's a fairly well-known effect that if your paper goes on ArXiv, it tends to have a significantly higher citation rate than an equivalent paper not on ArXiv for some definition of equivalent. Some of that is signal boosting, and some of that may be that people are somewhat hesitant of putting their papers that they're not quite so sure about on the ArXiv. So there are multiple effects here, and it would be interesting to see how they evolve over time and if they're detectable as effects. All right. This is, as of today, just under 1.8 million papers. We're running at about 15,000 submissions per month across all categories. Roughly 20% year-to-year growth. It is not quite exponential, I'm reliably told. In fact, many of the categories are saturated. We basically have the entire corpus being produced in many of our old categories. And they're growing only as essentially the world economy grows. But we keep getting new categories that undergo exponential growth, notably right now in computer science. In particular, actually, machine learning, vision, and language, I believe, are three major growth categories. I'm used to note when I was putting the final touches on this talk that as of last night, there are roughly 750 papers in ArXiv tagged for EMNLP 2020. That's quite impressive, actually. I'm probably being a little bit too generous in my let me tell you about ArXiv part of this talk, although I may still surprise even those of you who've been doing this for decades. I didn't try to do a comprehensive count of exactly how many papers there are. This is just a crude approximation, doing a 2 a.m. Simple search of who submitted this year to EMNLP and put in the ArXiv. We are at about 2 billion downloads. It's PDF downloads. And that is not complete because it does not include mirrors. It does not include bulk downloads through our bulk delivery. And it tries to scrape out robots. So the average paper has been downloaded about 1,000 times. We don't share the download statistics, and that's a policy that we've kept the whole time and that we intend to keep. It'll take some serious argument to convince us to start displaying individual download statistics on ArXiv. We are interested in providing the download statistics en masse anonymized, but we are not totally happy about our ability to anonymize the download statistics. We played with it a bit and found out that we could break our own anonymization. So if and when we figure out a safe way to share the statistics of downloads, I expect we will do that. By the way, I'm told that ArXiv traffic is order half the total internet traffic for Cornell as an institution, which surprised me. So we're running, if those of you who don't like doing arithmetic quickly, at about 150,000 new submissions per year. I don't think we're going to quite get to 200,000 this year. And roughly a quarter of them are currently in computer science. Physics in aggregate is still the largest category, but computer science is, I think, caught up with math, and it's going to overtake physics soon. We're not saturated in computer science by any means. And we're seeing a lot of demand from subfields of computer science that have not used ArXiv extensively in the recent decades. This is just a sense of our web traffic. We're running at about 30 million downloads a week. Yeah, 30 million downloads per week. I think it's downloads per week. Can't remember which statistic I grabbed for this figure, so don't worry about it. We do a lot of these color charts. There's an entire web page on ArXiv that can let you browse into these. These are the new submissions and fractional distribution of submissions. This is by major categories. Here's computer science. You can see the growth areas. They're the ones that start taking over the chart on towards the end. It's fun to play with, and if you're interested in seeing the dynamics of what's happening in different subfields in various subjects, this is a fairly useful glance to see what the current drivers are. Okay, so what a lot of you may not know or be aware of is that ArXiv is in fact moderated. In a perfect world, every submission is eyeballed by a PhD researchers in the field. Roughly 85% of papers, basically you see the title, glimpse the authors in the abstract, and it's like, this is fine. Don't need to have any further look on it. Roughly order 10% of papers get held up at some point. Most of that is for technical issues. We had a fair amount of tech processing recently because our tech engine was actually out of date. We spent a lot of effort this summer fixing that, updating tech and providing a more closed loop workflow on lab tech processing. So people should find it easier to quickly process their tech submissions and get their PDF and finish submitting, which should ease everybody's workload. There are still flavors of tech we can't handle. This is for deep technical reasons owing to the fact that our core code base is 30 years old. There's stuff we simply can't do because it's stuff that didn't exist 30 years ago, and it's the kernel of our operation. Until we can refactor that code, we are stuck with some anachronisms. Moderation does a couple of things. It works on classification. Has this been sent to the correct category? This is down to menu errors. When you select your category, you're using a drop-down menu. We get the normal fraction of oops, over or under scrolled on the menu and hit the category adjacent to mine. We have people who have been in a silo and don't realize they drifted out of it. And it's like, this is actually a better fit in a different category. And we have people who are under the impression that categories have prestige labels on them, and they want to push into a particular category because they feel that that is the community they want to see their work. And that is sometimes where we put our foot down and say, no, your paper is categorized by us as belonging to a different category, and this is not a competition. It's a matter of trying to guide users to discovery of content, not thrust your material onto an audience that may not be interested in it. And we are the ultimate arbiters of that. That is, we will listen to arguments, we'll take appeals, but we do this as a function that we do. That includes providing secondary classifications for papers. Sometimes the authors are asked to provide those. We will sometimes suggest them. And quite a lot of the time, and this is, I think, one of our successes and one of the things that makes ArXiv highly functional, we will look at a paper and say, hey, we know people who should know about this. Canonical examples of this would be, for example, new statistical techniques. We may see a paper come in on new statistical technique and send it to other categories in case somebody will eyeball it and say, this is just what I needed. But there are a number of other cross-fertilizations between categories that we try to expedite. We then, as I said, provide a persistent identifier. We index everything, and we archive it. ArXiv is an archive. Once it's there in perpetuity, with the exception of very rare cases, usually involving lawyers or national security. We do maintain version retention. So if you change a paper, the previous version is kept, and we tag the versions. So while still in moderation, we find that in theory, our standards for acceptance of paper to ArXiv are supposed to be homogeneous across subjects. In practice, they're heterogeneous, and they may be heterogeneous within a subject among different categories. As examples of that, I've discovered the mathematicians have this strange insistence on proofs. They seem to feel that every paper must be accompanied by some form of a formal proof. Whereas physicists, for example, are somewhat prone to having heuristic proofs or even just assertions. This sometimes causes friction when papers are cross-listed between subject areas, and this in fact is for example, source of friction between computer science and mathematics. The sort of in-house joke is the mathematician says you haven't proved it, and the computer science is this well, it worked for the first trillion instances, so that's good enough. And then we have a standoff. So we have to arbitrate such decisions and do something about it. We don't referee. We do not provide refereeing, but we do provide some quality control. And my personal stance is that we look for two broad criteria, very broad criteria, whether things are interesting, and by that I mean interesting to someone, or whether things are correct. Those are not the same. There are a lot of things that are correct but not very interesting. And there are many things that are interesting but are wrong. In physics language, we are more on trying to exclude the not even wrong papers. So we try to not gatekeep. we try to have some, maybe people should see this, but with some threshold. Okay, just some more meta comments on this. This operation is hard to scale well. We now make heavy use of automation. This is a very little advertised feature of ArXiv. We, in fact, do our own internal processing of papers. We run currently 3 classifiers. Papers with code classifier that operates on the metadata and is inline. So that was recently folded into the submission loop, and it provides on-the-fly classification of submissions and recommendations to users. We have a somewhat old full text classifier that's run asynchronously, and does some checks and sometimes recommendations. And then we have a beta classifier that's run offline that does both full text classification and checks on other system checks on papers to see if they're appropriate or in scope. And like I said, that is a beta version, but it provides useful input to us. It is imperative for us that we continue automating, improve automation if you're going to continue operating. The original 1991 ArXiv is not scalable. It has hit the limits of its scaling. We are muddling along and growing as we can, but we'd like to grow more, and we are going to have some qualitative changes in how we filter stuff. But fortunately, that is being produced. And I actually was taking notes today about some stuff and sent notes to our team saying, you should be aware of this and we need to think about whether to do something about it. Since we set boundaries, there will always be edge cases. The edge cases are a very small percentage. They're roughly 0.1% of submissions. In the aggregate, they're not important. They are really important to the individual authors that get caught on the edge. And getting caught on the edge usually means you're put on hold and we're not quite sure what to do about it. So we try to deal with those rationally, and that can be infuriating to authors, and it can be hard for us, but we have a process and we try to follow it. And everyone in the loop is human except our AI, and are all imperfect, including the AI. Recently, we've been dealing more with normative issues as we expand into fields that are normative. This became particularly acute with the COVID papers. We get a lot of the epidemiology and modeling papers, and we've been dealing with those, I think, fairly well. We got a small grant from Google to pay for some expedited moderating, and we have tightened up a bit on the COVID papers to try to stave off exaggerated claims or unsubstantiated things at the level we can without actually going to full refereeing. And we're doing this all while trying to balance the issue of whether not gatekeeping and not shutting stuff out because. Okay. So one of the things we are interested in and want to expedite is we want to provide interdisciplinary knowledge transfer. We want to promote discovery. Our structure is really aimed to the extent that there was any deliberation on how to set up as opposed to spontaneous organic growth as things came along, to moderate the kind of fire hose of information transfer and not drown people in too much data. But also show people what they should know. So not just the stuff that's in your silo. Most of us are very good about our silos. We know what our silo is, and I'd say 80% of readers of ArXiv are in their silo, they like their silo, they stick with their silo, and we found their silo for them. If anything, they find the silos are a little bit too broad, and they could tighten them up a bit. But a lot of our added value comes from the discovery of stuff you didn't know. Both the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. And we really are doing stuff to try to expedite that and provide lateral knowledge transfer and formal discovery processes. I should note we've also, I think, basically run into I like to call it Arrow's theorem when doing categorization. For some papers, there's just no one best category. However you juggle choice of primary and secondary categories, nothing's going to make everybody happy or even the majority happy. One of these days, one of our advisory mathematicians is going to nag me enough that I'll formalize this as a proof. But as a physicist, I think this is a heuristically true statement. Okay, so what are we doing right now? Well, we are in the middle of refactoring our code in situ. This is a conscious choice made about 4 or 5 years ago. We are moving to Dockerized Python. We're doing it piecewise. And we're not doing a grand swap out. We are re-scaffolding the code, or scaffolding the code and replacing pieces invisibly for the most part inside. We are also lifting the code base up to the cloud. It's going to be in the Google Cloud, thanks to a very generous donation by Google to offer to host us and waive the cost. We are working on streamlining the submission interface, which hopefully will bring some joy to some of you. And on the back end, a major project we're doing right now is to improve our moderation tools, to improve the workflow for moderators, and basically reduce the number of touches, particularly as you have to start coordinating moderators with very large categories requiring multiple moderators. Our APIs are limited and out of date, and we would like to do some serious API updates and provide more services. And we are formally planning to go all open source. And bits and pieces of ArXiv are on GitHub right now. And anybody wants to come in and play with it and push in some code, we'll take a look. And we would like to go to a open source and crowdsourced based code to leverage the fact that we're very limited in our development team in terms of just sheer number of people. Okay, we are also formalizing a collaborative effort with a bunch of people, and we are throwing this open to people to collaborate with us. This is going to be through a channel that you may have seen if you've been browsing ArXiv recently on the web. It's been tagged ArXiv Labs. ArXiv Labs is actually a concept we came up with several years ago, but it didn't quite have the resources to implement it the way we wanted to. And so now we just went ahead and implemented it. We have a number of partners we've been working with quietly for a large number of years, in particular the Astrophysical Data System, which is a major scientific literature database maintained by NASA at the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard. And Inspire HAP, which is the particle physics paper and database, which was originally out of Stanford and is now moved to CERN. Those are long-term, fairly tight connections where we work with them to, in particular, make sure that their preprint deliveries are updated and they have all the preprints in the categories they want and can find them and display them. We are working with AI2, Semantic Scholar in particular, and this started as a bibliographic explorer. And we also have been working with Google Scholar, and you'll see those in our side tabs on the abstract pages, and they provide functionality, and we're working to improve that functionality, particularly as we can get improved APIs. Very recently, we established a formal relationship with Papers with Code. In particular, ArXiv papers with code are now tagged through Papers with Code. Papers with Code is for machine learning papers. It is possible that some non-machine learning code has been accidentally tagged through Papers with Code, and they're aware of this, and they may do something about that. We also are tagging Core, which is a project for research discovery in the UK. And those of you who like vacuuming down huge amounts of huge numbers of scientific papers. You probably successively found out that if you try to do it one at a time in the script through ArXiv, it'll block you. And it may be giving you a flashback to your graduate student days. You're welcome. More recently, we provided a for-fee basis through Amazon S3. So the ArXiv database has been available for bulk downloads through AWS, but you pay. All of this is contingent on the fact that you can't vacuum us down and then serve up ArXiv. We will block you and come after you if you do that. You can keep it and read it. You can use your computer to read it, but you can't send it out to other people. The conditions of our terms of use is that if you want an ArXiv paper, you have to go back to ArXiv and grab it from us, or one of our authorized mirrors. Well, we've now partnered with Kaggle. It's actually started as a coronavirus project, and then it was just like, hey, we might as well just do the whole thing. And this is essentially a free version of S3, but on Kaggle. So periodically, Kaggle updates and ingests whatever new papers that come in. I want to say monthly. I can't remember the exact cadence we settled on, but all of ArXiv is on Kaggle for specifically the intent was to provide full text searches and discovery projects, and it's free. It is a multi-year agreement, and it's there for people to play with. And we are thinking about setting up some challenges that we would like people to do. Although it's one of many things we'd like to do that we haven't quite gotten around to. We are working with other people. I think I'm going to tease a couple of them a little bit later. And but those are things that are not formalized yet or kind of completely sealed. All right, we are also actively going to encourage third-party services. We always passively acceded to third-party services. We'd like to be a little bit more proactive on that. Some of the kind of types of things we have in mind are, for example, ArXiv Sanity, and the versions of that have been hacked to serve other subject areas like HepTH. And ArXiv Vanity, which is a HTML5 processing project. This is the one that kind of got suspended because of reasons. And we would like more of that, and we would like to expedite it to the extent we can, and we'd like to coordinate it, and we, in some cases, would like to talk to people about bringing stuff in-house. Although that'll be done very judiciously because we want to maintain a slim core operation, and we don't want to expose our internals, except if we have a stable and trusted source. Basically, we can't take somebody's project and then take over the maintenance of it, and the way we currently are resourced. So we either have to have some assurance that the developers will continue maintaining it, or that really we decide that it's a critical function and that we will formally take over maintaining it and then somehow find the resources to do so. Anyway, so this is ArXiv Labs. Do go play with it if you haven't looked at it yet. I said a lot of this already. Okay, so we are talking to Code Ocean about doing some additional software discovery in parallel with the papers of code. I think that's the only current discussion I'm allowed to mention. We are, as I mentioned earlier, seriously considering minting DOIs for our entire corpus and issuing DOIs paralleling the ArXiv IDs, really just as a expediting people who build DOI services and letting them play with ArXiv more effortlessly. So as a service to the community. The hang up, actually, to be honest, is money. Issuing a couple of million DOIs, even at pennies per DOI, is a significant fraction of our budget. We are seriously looking at improved metadata. There's a trade-off here because we don't want to burden our authors with having to fill out several hundred metadata fields. But we're under a lot of pressure, particularly from funding agencies, to provide maybe a little bit more metadata than we do currently, which is really minimal. The required metadata for submission to ArXiv is deliberately absolutely minimal. But in particular, we may do some metadata extraction ourselves and just populate fields for the authors. But the big ones that people want are institutional IDs, and we're talking to the institutional ID things that got set up and that are trying to start to issue institutional IDs. Funding acknowledgements, that is a big deal, particularly with the various open access projects that are coming through. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that, but we're willing to try, particularly if somebody can provide resources for us to do that. And content type. A lot of stuff we'd like to do hinges on lack of content type tags, and we're working to do something about that. We're also going to, just because we should, do a dark archive. And we're also working on some other stuff, which maybe I'll tell you about one year. All right, what do we want to do? And I have exactly 3 minutes to tell you. What I would like to see us do is provide customized content and interfaces for people. Where you could either pick your silo. A lot of people, like I said, are happy with the categorizations and the silos. To a large extent, our categories follow the societies, the professional societies, categorizations, divisions, forums, however they structure it. We somewhat parallel those. It would be nice to have more flexible and modern interfaces. Email, RSS, and click on a web page are great, but there are other ways to do it. We don't want to jump on every flash in the pan fad. Our proudest moment is that we never put any Flash code on the archive. Yeah, okay, at least one person left at that. But we can do more. We would also like to expand the content types that we serve. Our main worry there is archival stability. So, for example, there's a high demand for us to provide notebook delivery, where you have your LaTeX file and your code, and all of it is managed through a Jupyter notebook or whatever. Well, people like share those. If we can be assured of some stability there, we can do that. You can actually already do that by offering a supplemental data, which is a very underutilized feature of ArXiv. It's there, but we know that very few people use it. We would like to do both personalized discovery and smart discovery. My personal very low hill on which I might make a stand is that if we start doing personalized discoveries, we're going to include a random factor. We're going to throw in 2 papers in 100. There's going to be some absolutely completely random stuff out of the archive corpus, just so we don't force you into a silo and hold you in there. We all know the pathologies there are of boosting people's preferences in terms of delivery of information. And we really don't want to go there with scientific information. We have to both provide focused delivery so that people can actually find the stuff they need and not just be piling through 1,000 papers a day. But we also have to make sure that we're not guiding and telling you what you should be reading. We have to offer you a buffet of what you should be looking at and let you pick, and showing you some stuff that you might like if you only tried it. A big expansion are overlay journals. These are journals that basically take archive papers and referee them and then tag them with this is now part of our journal. These are very interesting things. They are happening. They are happening everything from formally organized institutions to a couple of people coming together and saying, hey, can we say that your paper is in our journal? We have no commitment to support those. So if you're doing that, understand we probably are aware of your existence, even if you didn't tell us about yourselves. But you're relying on us to provide a service we have not agreed to provide. And we would like to do something about that, but we're not quite sure how. Also, a feature we are always asked about every year, that we discuss every year at our meeting, is to provide for comment interface and or discussion forums, And the answer to that currently, and I think for the near future, is no, 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 no. We are acutely aware of all the pitfalls such things lead to. We think we know better than our users. It's one of the places where we stand and say, no, you may want this, but we know better. You don't really want this. We are happy for anyone in the world to provide a third-party comment and/or discussion forum. Link it to us, advertise it, shout to the world about it. And if it works, we'll be very happy. But we are also very acutely aware of how these things fail, and we do not have the time or the energy to manage them. And until we find a different way of running them, we are not going to bring them in-house. Some of the stuff is stuff, quite frankly, we'd like to do that's aspirational, and we have neither the money nor the people to do. So if you have some money and people, we'll take it. And that's it. I'm happy to take questions, and I think I went over time by about a minute.